was a good get. I
When the rain don't fall, that's when you know you're gonna go dry. When the rain don't fall, that's when you know you're gonna go dry. And it won't do no good to be crying out loud, babe, or cursing the sky.
Okay, welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana. Election Day is November 7th, which is exactly 3 weeks from tonight. It's a municipal election year, and a lot of people don't really get too excited about municipal elections, but the decisions that are made on our town level influence our day-to-day lives as much or perhaps more than the decisions made at the state and national level. So we get very excited about municipal elections, and
We
we
certainly do.
hope to get you excited too. So my guest tonight is again Leon Long. He is running for mayor of New London, and I think he was on a month or so ago when the campaign was, season was just getting started.
Right.
So we have him back to talk in more detail about the campaign, about the issues. And we invited, we made a Facebook event and invited people to share questions. We have a bulletin board in our office where we've invited people to, put in Post-it notes what they'd like to see the administration do over the next few years. And we've just generally been asking for feedback, but we also invite anyone who's watching this show live to call in if you have any questions, because I think people know about Leon's background a little more than they did a month ago or a couple months ago, but now we want to kind of put our teeth into the issues that the city is facing now and will over the next few years. So I guess I guess the place I'll start is the first question on our bulletin boards in the office were like, what do you love about New London?
Right.
And I'm going to ask you what you love about New London, but I also have some of the things that people said that you can comment on.
Right. Well, my answer, albeit genuine, is also kind of safe. It's the people. It's always been the people. When I first moved to New London 20 years ago, I was immediately accepted by what felt like a huge group of people that all knew each other. It was the community, but it had this feeling like it was a group. And I just love that, and also being somebody that went to college in Philadelphia, knowing what that city's like and the great pride they take in their city. That was forever ago, but I hadn't seen or felt anything like that until I moved to New London. That tremendous pride in their city, you get swept up in it, and I'm very much still swept up in it. But it's certainly the people and how the community just believes so much in itself. They fight so hard, and I love that.
Now, one of the things that someone had put on that bulletin board was talking about the walkability of our city. Sometimes it's seen as sort of a disadvantage that our city's less than 6 square miles.
Right.
But for people who don't have cars, this could be an advantage. So in a role of mayor or even just active citizen, What would you do to help our city capitalize on the fact that it's small and could be walkable?
Well, there are a couple of different ways to approach it. I mean, you want to think about what's in place and how you can expand on it, because we have a lot of good things to offer for people who are non-driving citizens. I myself, for the longest time, was a non-driving citizen, so I hear you. And so they are always on my mind. But then there's also the safety issue. What can be done to ensure that the pedestrians who are on foot are safe? And so that is something that I think about often. A little fun, sort of artsy idea that can also contribute to our city's safety, particularly when it comes to being a walkable community, would be some sort of restoration of our crosswalks. I'm a big fan of the city of Salem. I just love to go there every year. My partner and I do. And so when we're there, we love this. There's this one church that has in front of it a crosswalk that is a rainbow. And it's just, it's beautiful, it's a good message, but it's visibility for this safety feature. People stop and acknowledge this crosswalk, which is the purpose of them. So if not rainbows in New London, you know, just I always thought, because crosswalks are traditionally white, maybe if you did some sort of like light green, light yellow, light green, light yellow, you know, pattern, it doesn't distract too much. It's still a brightly colored strip, but it's a little bit more pride in our city colors. But doing something like that, I always thought, would be like an excuse to remind the community of the importance of acknowledging a crosswalk if there was a citywide program where all of our crosswalks would be redone. It's just an awareness thing. It's a fun little idea I had. Interacting with some folks on Facebook, which I do sometimes, somebody proposed that there should be bike racks at L&M because there aren't, and he takes a bike to the hospital. And so a couple of things to say about that. You know, should the city pay for some? No, not necessarily. I think L&M could probably afford to put bike racks out. I do think that a municipality who professes to be supportive of biking could get behind an effort like that. It's about public access to the hospital. Sometimes people take a bike to the hospital. And so they would want to be able to chain it up and make sure it's safe, and I think they should be able to. So that's just an example of something that maybe we could still do. But New London is certainly a close-knit community, and everything is so compact when you get to the downtown area, but still somehow hard to find if you're not from here. And so, you know, certainly signage could help. I've always been a fan of the sort of "you are here," you know, kiosk that you'd see in a mall. Something similar to that in our train station to direct people to the different things that we have to offer, landmarks, retail locations, of course, restaurants, throughout the city, because it's always been an annoyance to me that the train station is so close to our downtown area, and everybody who gets off, you know, the buses, trains, and ferries really doesn't have a connection to the downtown. As mayor, that would be one of the main things that I'm looking at, because that leads to economic development. That's how you get more people walking around downtown, which is what all of our businesses want.
So, well, it's funny that you mentioned L&M, because I worked at L&M Hospital for 6 years back in the early 90s, and I was a bicycle commuter to work because parking was such a nightmare. It was before I moved to New London. When I moved to New London, for the last year I worked there, I walked to work. I didn't bike to work, but I lived in Pleasure Beach and Waterford and rode my bike to work every day.
Yeah, I mean, and we have our bike lanes that we've been celebrating. So, I mean, it's right there, you know, but that's an example of, if I may, you know, where the municipality and this very important entity like the hospital, you know, I don't think somebody in the hospital administration said, let's be sure to never put bike racks out there, or let's be sure to not be accessible to those who ride bikes. It's just an oversight. That's something that a community member noticed, and that's what I was going to say. This is why listening to them is so important, because the municipality doesn't see everything, and if you're holed up in City Hall all the time talking to each other, you're going to miss a lot. You're going to miss a lot.
Now, you had mentioned at first that one of the things that really attracted you to New London was the community and how both proud and welcoming it could be.
Yes.
What can a mayor do to like build on that? Because I agree that a lot of us who settled here felt that same way.
Well, a non-specific answer would be to just generally keep that mentality in mind. Keep that in mind, that feeling that I had when I was a new resident. What I saw in the city that made me feel so welcome, I would always want to make sure that those things are in place, that sentiment is there. It's a feeling. It's really a feeling. There's no legislation I can get passed to make sure that everyone feels comfortable. Perhaps there is, and I'll take a look at it. But I think it is just, it's a sentiment that the city leader has to have that would hopefully rub off on the other departments, the other administrators in the government. We have lots of nonprofits that work on all different things, and if any of them are a part of any sort of welcoming committee, I know that we have someone like Barbara Neff does quite a bit when we have visitors coming into the pier. Always wants to make sure they're welcome, and I've watched this individual work tirelessly to do that. You know, so whatever programs there are that exist like that, maybe enhance them in some way. But promotion is something I usually lean on, and that's definitely a way to make sure that people feel welcome, to communicate to them that they're welcome, as opposed to not making an effort to get people to come to the city. It seems sort of obvious, but messaging is so important, and making sure that people hear New Londoners say that they're welcome and the municipality say that they're welcome is very important. And there's a lot of different ways that we can get that message out as well.
And your background is promotion. When I look back, the mayors that New London has had since we went to this form of government in 2011 have both been attorneys by trade, and
Yeah.
Your background is a little bit different.
It's a lot bit different. It's a lot bit
So
different.
how do you feel like that would, shift the role of mayor?
Sure. So, that's such a fantastic question. And I'm happy to answer it because this is all a part of the change that I think I would bring. My experience is different. My thought process is different. My strategizing is different. My priorities are different. My main profession has been promotion and marketing up to this point, but it is the constant appeal to the public that is what I am always really obsessing over at work, is how to make sure that a message gets out clearly and concisely and covers as much ground as we can. And so, not to say that a lawyer couldn't do that, but I think that sort of mentality about poring over notes and drilling down on procedure and sort of closed room, and of course procedure is important, but what I would be willing to do always is get creative with an approach or a strategy if I felt that it was going to really solve a problem. I have a funny relationship with tradition, It's important and it's fun. I'm a sentimental guy, but this is people's lives that we're talking about, and if there is something not getting done and we can see that there's a need that isn't being met, if we don't have a procedure in place, just going to go out on a limb. I don't know that a lawyer has the creativity or the willingness to step out on a branch and do something that he doesn't feel comfortable with, because I don't know why they wouldn't do that. But getting creative with policy is very important to me, and I think that that's something that I'd bring to the table that we haven't really seen. I do give Mayor Pazaro credit for one thing. He does have a vision for the city. However, that vision for the city has blind spots. We see that. And I also think that we've seen the limit of this person's imagination. So he's done his best, but I think that we need something else.
Now, in the office where we were asking, we've been asking for public feedback, the second question we asked was, what frustrates you?
Of course.
And there are I don't know if you want to start with the really big one, or maybe we should.
Sure.
The biggest concern that people had was related to housing.
Right.
In many different ways, out-of-town landlords, high cost, the way our property taxes work. There are so many issues related to housing. So how do you see where we are housing-wise in New London, and where we're going, where we should be going, where the blind spots might be, whatever? It's a big issue, so run with it.
Sure. So I have a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is if we keep going in the direction we're going, we're going to see some real failure down the road. If we keep our leadership exactly the way it is, those policies won't change, and we're going to see some really big failures down the road because they're starting to emerge now under this current leadership. The easiest thing to point to is rising rents, but to break down why they're rising is far more important. We see sort of this problem across the country, but I'm not running for national office. I'm running for New London's mayor, and we have our own issues. And while they look like some of the national issues, again, I believe that we can come up with solutions that are creative, maybe a little different than what other people are doing, that can solve the problem. And I always view New London as a city that has the potential to be a leader and a trendsetter, because I've seen myself how eager our citizens are to make change. And that's where their frustration comes from, because they have leadership that's eager to ignore them. But for housing, we have a lot of brand new shiny apartment buildings popping up all over town. And for those of you who don't know, the very specific reason that they're popping up is to accommodate an influx of residents. And they are a specific type of resident. They tend to work at Electric Boat. They tend to be single. They need apartments that have one bedroom or studios, and that's what they're being built. This isn't my opinion. A family can't use a studio apartment. So those apartments, the argument could be made that they're not just for EB workers, but I have a stronger argument that they're not for families. It's verifiable. You can't put a family of 3 or 4 in a studio or a one bedroom. So those spaces are not for them. So in addition to more housing being built, housing units being built that aren't accessible to families, they are causing rents to rise for families that already have places to stay that may be close to those apartments. This is a natural reaction when an expensive apartment complex goes in for the surrounding areas for some landlords to raise rent, to keep up. There's just no way around that. It's going to happen. So I would like to look very closely at concerns about rent control and options that we have around rent control. We have to figure out a way to stop these rents from rising. The apartment complexes will continue to come under this same leadership if there's no change in November, and the rents will continue to rise. And this problem is already off the rails. This is not something that our current leadership can get their arms around. The problem's been created by them. It has grown under them, and I just cannot see a scenario where they admit the mistake, first of all. Second of all, say, okay, let's hear some ideas on how we can fix this. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so what kinds of things do families need? Well, we always think of a home first. For me, it's about, I've said before, dignity. People deserve, families deserve a place to sit and have dinner at the end of the day with a roof over their head where they can talk about, their experiences for the day. It shouldn't seem like a luxury. A dining room table shouldn't seem like a luxury. But in New London, it kind of feels that way for some people, let alone a room to put this dining room table in. So more options for actual affordable housing, and keying in on the word house is is important to me. And I'm always willing to give credit to entities like the Southeastern Connecticut Land Trust and other organizations who are devoted to getting people into homes and understand the importance of getting families into homes. New London has always been a diverse city, and it's always been family-centric. Another thing that I love about it, and that is evidenced in our pride in our schools and our fondness for our recreation programs. All of those things are youth-driven, and if you're centered on youth and focused on youth, then you're family-focused. I mean, it goes without saying. And so when we talk about this new push for access to housing for single people and non-families without any real teeth or real effort in the plan to address the needs for people to find homes, we can see things aren't balanced. And so again, that's why I say if we don't change leadership, that will continue to widen. It's troubling, it's really, really troubling because it's all I hear. And then for some of my friends that live in some of these apartments, I'll give one example. There is two people I know, they each live in the Docks, let's just say it,
Yeah.
which is an apartment complex located on Bank Street. And both of them were told that their rent had to go up, and one of them fought it and said, "What do you mean?" And that's a good question, by the way. The Docks was just built. We're raising rent already? Why are you raising rent? You're the reason other people are raising rent. Like, what's going on? And so they told their residents they had to raise rent. One of my friends fought it, and her rent went up this much. And my other friend didn't fight it. He simply said, "Okay, let me adhere and do what I'm told," and his rent went up this much. So to me, that's the wild, wild west. You either need to go up this much on your rent for this reason, which you've said in this letter, or you don't. Or you don't. And so that is something that I don't know what options there are for the city to look into that, but I want to hit the gas on those options and figure them out, because that is not fair. That's just simply not fair. And so lots of uneven policies, and then when you look at these buildings as well, I worry about, talking again about national issues that are affecting us here in New London. A lot of, I want to say first, there are a lot of good landlords out there. They do exist. I don't mean to sound like I'm disparaging all landlords. My dad is a landlord. He owns a couple properties in a couple of different states, actually. Homes, in states that we've lived in. He'll pick up one and then he moves, and there's, But he is somebody that I lean on for advice all the time, and I bounce things off of him all the time. If I've asked him a lot of times if the administration or the municipality in the city that you have a home in decided to do this or this, how would you feel about it as a renter or as a landlord? And he doesn't live in this state, but I can say that based on his reaction, I don't think I'd lose his vote if he lived here, based on some of the ideas that I have. But one thing that he does, which I know is an option for some, is to give your residents a first right of refusal. If you want to sell your property, you can give them a chance to purchase it, or to come up with a plan to purchase it. And I like that idea. I think it generally would work. Maybe there's some scenarios where it can't, but I think it's something that the city should explore. I mean, I have lots to say about housing, but right now, ultimately, I would say this to finish up. More people in New London rent, including myself, than own homes.
By a lot, actually.
By a lot.
We've got almost the lowest.
It's basically 60-40.
I think it's even worse than that. I
Yeah.
think it's more like 65-35.
Yeah, I mean, hey.
We have one of the worst home ownership rates in the state.
Right. And
On a par with Hartford and Bridgeport and some of the bigger cities.
And so when you hear, my rent has gone up twice in the last 3 years. So when you hear the city boasting about keeping property tax low, I mean, that is something to boast about, but you have to understand what percentage of our city that's affecting. You can figure out exactly what percentage of our city that affects, and it is not that big of a percentage when compared to the people that are still out here struggling to find place to stay at all, or if they're in a place and lucky enough to have a home, struggling to make ends meet, paycheck to paycheck. They're not benefiting from lower property tax. They aren't at all. They're just getting hammered from higher rents and monthly rates, which we know where that comes from.
And I guess part of the issue is that housing is such a basic fundamental need.
Right.
If people who don't have a roof over their head, it's hard for them to have regular jobs. They're likely to be food insecure. They certainly don't have food storage, facilities.
Right.
So it's a big issue, and I don't even know really where to start on thinking about some of this housing. But when you started talking, I was thinking about how in architecture, form follows function.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about the apartment buildings being primarily studios and one bedroom, with a few two-bedroom apartments thrown in,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it very clear that the function is to get single people and adult couples
Right.
in without being an adult-only complex. You're going to get pretty much all adults living there.
Right.
And in today's world, where a lot of people are working at home and they have home offices, even a two-bedroom is something that a couple might want if they can afford it.
Right.
You don't need
I'm lucky. I mean, I think my living experience in New London is very interesting to share because I know that people can relate to it. I rent. My landlord is a nice guy. He doesn't live in the city. He does take care of the building. He was careful to explain why he wanted to raise our rent, and I thought it was fair. Did I want it to happen? Of course not, but I understand how these things work, and he didn't seem malicious, At any rate, it's with my renting situation. Although my rent's gone up, I'm fortunate enough to say that I live in a 3-bedroom apartment. I have two living rooms, sort of. So I've made one of them into an office that has a very, very high use and it's very functional as an office. But I mean, not everyone has that ability. So yeah, that's a long way to get to. Yeah, I agree that some couples would want a 2-bedroom as well, but with the price of it, they don't have that option. A lot of them.
Yeah, and what I've been seeing that's kind of disturbing to me these days is, I think a week or so ago in property transactions, there were 4 or 5 houses on Franklin Street, which are old houses. They are largely occupied by renters.
Right.
Sometimes with owner occupancy as well because it's multi-unit. And they were just sold to a corporation. And so when you say, give the tenants at least the right of first refusal, some of these buildings, if they're 3-family, it might be an interesting idea to see those 3 families if they could pool their funds and create a 3-unit co-op.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I mean about getting creative. I mean, throw it all up there, and see what sticks. But I like that approach in the planning phase. I'm not somebody who just throws everything up there to see what sticks. But when it comes to planning and ideas, throw everything you have. Find something else and throw that too. That might be the one. I mean, it sounds corny, but I obsess over that stuff. I love an opportunity to hear a new idea about anything because when you have that feeling where you go, oh yeah, that would work, But one more thing too about housing and how this all ties together. And we think about what I call the identity of our city changing with this push for single units and all of this, and this kind of moving away from the focus on the need of the family, which of course is homes. Many of those families rent, and there's just not a lot being done for them. In a meeting with a New London high school student I was fortunate enough to have, he explained to me that, you know, the registration rate for, enrollment rate, I'm sorry, for the school is low. Well, I don't know that inviting a bunch of single people into the city will solve that. I don't know that ignoring the plight of the family with no homes is going to solve that as they see their way out of the city to find somewhere else to live. So it's about that as well. We're talking about housing, but my mind actually jumps to education because we want our school to get higher registration. And so there is a bigger picture that I do believe the community is thinking about. I'm certainly thinking about it, that I don't think our leadership is. And again, it sounds like my opinion, but we can see what their approach is, what their plan is, and how it's being carried out. And it doesn't seem to me like filling the classrooms in our school is top of mind for them. It can't be with their approach to housing.
Yeah, and I just wanted to note, in New London, very often when people talk about housing being affordable, our minds jump to subsidized housing, but in the past, there's been quite a bit of housing that's affordable without being subsidized, subject to rules, 30% of your income or whatever.
Right.
There's been housing that's affordable because it's affordable. That's what the owner, feels as though they could rent the apartment for to cover their basic expenses, and they weren't interested in, giving money to their shareholders if they're a big corporation.
I agree. So the average income for a New Londoner, 28,000-ish. So you have, there's it's not top of mind, but there is a metric that you can use to establish based on what someone's income is, how much they could afford to pay rent every month.
Yeah, it's something like 30%.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. Again, bringing it back to messaging. The city is saying whatever it wants. It's saying whatever it wants. It's so laughable that they would call these apartments affordable. Affordable to who? That is the most important thing. And the whole community sees through it, And so this is the frustration that I have, and I share it with the community. They're lying. They're lying. It's being dishonest, it's misleading, it's lying, it's not affordable. There is a metric that you can use to establish what's close to affordable. And if they've used that metric and then profess to call these still affordable, that's a lie. Or they don't know that metric. They don't have that in their mind, that there's a way you can figure out how to make something that's actually affordable. And so that's not good either. But I always ask the question, affordable to who? But to bring it back to messaging, this is what I wish they would communicate. There is a difference between affordable housing, subsidized housing. And the city isn't making that distinction. They're just not. They're not talking about it at all. They just want to throw the word affordable up and hope that we get fooled. But I mean, it's so silly, because if I believe them and take them at their word that something over here is affordable, I mean, that falls apart the moment I go on the internet and look at the rates, or I go and talk to them and ask them what they would charge. It falls apart. So messaging is important, and you can't be misleading like that. And again, the whole community sees through it. And, my personal opinion, that's one of those things that they are avoiding when they stay out of the public's eye, which they've been, and we'll get to that.
We will.
We will get to that.
And I do want to note that as a homeowner in
Yep.
New London who bought our house almost 30 years ago, living in New London in a house that you own,
Right.
And have owned long enough to have paid the mortgage on, that's the most affordable housing in the city.
Yeah. So
It
where are
really
the programs
is.
to
So-
get people to that point? They're
So
not out there.
honestly, I could pay more property tax. I'm not really that impressed by our property tax going down, a couple of points on our mill rate, because you know what, my insurance, my upkeep, my property tax are a lot less than most people are paying for rent in the city.
Right. That's what I've been saying is they boast about low property taxes, but with high rents all throughout the city, the low property taxes is the least you can do. And we already discussed how it affects far less than half the citizens.
So we've talked about housing, but I think when people were giving input about priorities, the other issue is small local businesses.
Yes.
Because those business owners are facing some of parallel problems to what renters are. Usually they are also renters. And what are your thoughts on small business, whether it's important to our economy, how we could foster it, whatever?
So there are a couple of different things that can affect the ability for a small business to succeed, right? And sometimes those things are completely internal, and I don't mean in the business, of course that's true too, but I mean like inside of their own city. It could be a policy, or if the city is failing in some other area, that it affects the business. And that's happening in New London. That's happening in New London. We are failing our small businesses. There's stops and starts all the time about ways to improve. There's always a news article in the day about what the city's doing. I don't ever really see it. There are some programs they've put forth, but they have, I'll give an example. So there is the Annex, right? We're familiar with the Annex on State Street. And they applied for a grant that the city was offering. And I mean, this is local artists contributing to the vibrancy of our economy in a big, big way. And they've made a name for themselves. People are asking for their brand by name, right? And their brand is one that celebrates New London. They make things that say New London on them. And so that's great. But so the city offers them as a small business this grant, and they fill out the paperwork, and they don't qualify for the grant because their residence is not in New London. The business is, which is what I care about, right? And I'm offended for them. I don't care that they don't live in New London. I really don't. What a great investment to make in our city to open a business downtown. What a great your devotion or your belief in our city never should be questioned. You put your life and your money into a business in our city. That's the end of it. You're a hero. You know what I mean? In my opinion. And so what a flaw. What a flaw. So they weren't able to grow their business in the way that they had hoped because of that simple thing. So that's one small example. I wouldn't have put that caveat in there at all, that you have to live in New London to benefit. If your business that you're trying to benefit is in New London, certainly keeping it in New London in all the ways we can is important to me, but that is not one where I see that has to be the cutoff.
It actually seems as though there are a few separate things happening. For one thing, the big apartment buildings that are going up that are getting tax breaks, they might not be getting grants, but they are getting abatements, usually.
Right.
Those owners don't live in New London.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
But on the housing side, I do think it would be a great idea to return to getting subsidies for city employees who want to move to the city. I know people who purchased their houses in New London while these programs were in effect. If you're a teacher in our schools or you work for the Public Works Department or whatever, then the city can give you some kind of a break grants for purchasing houses here to live here. But this seems like a whole different category that would be strictly related to a business in New London.
Right. So more opportunities like that. I mean, the subject fascinates me because we if we watch the news and we're listening to things nationally, there's always billions being thrown around, right? Congress approved $400 million for this, or $2 billion set aside earmarked for this, or whatever. And every business owner hears that and goes, I just want like 0.009% of that, you know, like, and
Yeah.
I do so much with that. I could buy a building with that or something. So, you know, in New London, it's not that we have billions to throw at a business, but even divvying up $1 million, you know, it can go so far. And so there's, like I said, some efforts made to enhance small businesses, but it's just still more hurdles. You know, it's not so accessible. We can see the flaws in the plans that they've put forth before. Business is very, very devoted to our city, and it's not just like, you know, I sell pizza and I want to sell pizza so I can make money, and I like New London, but I'm just doing this thing so I can make money. Like, the pizza doesn't necessarily help grow our brand,
Right.
like clothing items that do say New London on them. You know, this is what they're trying to do, and they weren't able to get access to help. And so that's just one example, but specific policy proposals to enhance downtown businesses. I think first about some of the empty businesses, just real quick to throw that out there. You know, the idea that businesses could join together and share a space is always something that's been of interest to me. We've got plenty of empty spaces downtown, unfortunately, and you know, if we can get two businesses that can't afford on their own to pay rent to come together, now we have an occupied shop front that wasn't occupied, and everybody wants that. There are virtual businesses, digital shops that exist, Etsy shops, that sort of thing. And some of them are located in our area, and if they are on the grow and their next step may be a brick and mortar location, I'd like to help as mayor figure out a way to get them to come downtown instead of going to another city. And same for businesses that exist out of homes. Not a ton of those, but that's another example of something that might have an established customer base and a business plan, but just needs help getting into a building. Well, let's help them do that. Now, for our existing businesses, I have so much to say about this. So the number one problem that our businesses face downtown is they cannot open during the day, some of them. They don't feel comfortable doing it. And I don't know that too many of our city leaders would admit that problem. They certainly don't want to tackle that problem. So when I first ran for city council 3 years ago, I had a proposal called Open for Lunch, an Open for Lunch initiative. And it goes like this. The city should do whatever it can to make businesses here already feel comfortable opening during the day. Let's look at what that would entail. So an expansion of hours means for
More staff.
For a restaurant, it means more staff. You're paying somebody to come in at 11 instead of 4. Or you're paying your cook to come in and prep food at 9 a.m. instead of at 3 p.m., right? So staffing, absolutely. You're going to have more expenses when it comes to, you know, your electricity and all of that to run your business. And then also, you know, if it's a restaurant, you might need to get more product or different product, you know, still more. And then, of course, messaging, getting the word out. Not every business can pay for that sort of thing. But those are the 4 things that I can establish would be a hurdle to opening up during the day in a city like New London. And so the city should, and I think we can do this because we have a cultural district, which its number one mission is to enhance our downtown businesses for the purpose of promoting tourism. So an Open for Lunch initiative would go like this. We should get behind an effort to supplement these businesses where we can, to get them what they need to feel comfortable opening. This should take as long as it needs because it's not an event. You know, this is changing the way our city looks and feels. It's changing the way we do business, literally, because we don't do business a lot during the day. So getting behind these businesses, asking them more than once, right, a sustained effort to really establish the different needs from the different businesses. And figuring out where we can fund, where we can supplement, what we can do. Is there something we can get from the state? because we're a very popular town, we're a highly trafficked town, but the happening,
Yeah.
we all have an opinion of that phrase. Yeah, there's something happening, but there's also a lot not happening, and that's what I'm trying to address. So, figuring out what these businesses need, having these meetings with these business owners, and really, really listening to them, letting them take the wheel. The city will never know more than the business owner what the business owner needs. And right now we have a setup like that, where they keep telling them what they need. And so that's the focus. The first focus is getting them to let us know what they need and figure out how we can make this environment one that they'd feel comfortable opening during the day. It can't be one business. We've seen in the past some of them try, and I've always said, you know, if a business tries to open for lunch when they haven't normally, and it doesn't really work out, and it's not really a hit, you know, they're going to be burned by that. They're probably never going to try it again. So it has to be all of the businesses, all of them. And so however long that takes, whatever it takes, that's what we need to try to make happen, because the point of all of them doing it is so that we can then put a moneyed effort behind promoting that New London is open for lunch, right? And tell the region and every publication and all of the word out that New London is open for lunch, so that when we say that this is going to start spring of whatever or what have you, then people know that they're going to come and see something. We wouldn't get the whole city behind promoting that this restaurant is now open for lunch when they previously only opened at 4. But if we could say that the city was, and when those people come, that there's restaurants and galleries and our wonderful retail locations. We don't have many of them, but the ones we have are really, really awesome. And people could walk around and see that there's no gaps. You know, there might be empty shop fronts, but the places that are in business are open. And make this feel a little bit more like a Westerly or a Mystic, which is what we always talk about. We always talk about comparing New London to Mystic, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. Inspiration is a good thing, and we can just make it our own. And so that's something that I've always thought about. We need to figure out a way to open our businesses up during the day.
And part of that sounds like the city would have to assume some of the risk and not just put it on the individual business owners.
Right.
In some way.
And that's,
at least for the first few years.
Right. And so, you know, however long it takes, I think that if you take the time to have a couple of different meetings and forums with the feedback forums, if you want to call them, with the business owners and really establish, and then give it time to manifest and get all of the details worked out, so that when we do this and open it up, that it actually works, you know? And so it'd be a huge undertaking, but I am up for the challenge, and I think that the city could get behind it if they knew that this effort was to make sure that our businesses had occupants and people going in and out of them during the day, you know.
Okay, well, our time is getting shorter, actually, so I want to start talking about this year's election season, and I don't think it's been very much in the newspaper. For a municipal election, it's been way too low-key for my taste. So, you know, there have been very few opportunities for people to meet candidates. There hasn't been a lot in the newspaper. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences trying to run a campaign as someone who's not on row A of the ballot?
Right. So, I've recently been christened the loudest candidate, and I just love that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I wear it like a badge of honor. And it's true. It's really true. You know, sometimes it feels like a one-man race. It really does, which is the reason I got in the first place, because I thought it would be so embarrassing for the city of New London to not have any challenge to the leadership that we are all, feels like we're all dissatisfied with. So obviously there is a Republican candidate and myself running against the incumbent Democratic mayor, but there is a whole party that we are running against. It's a machine. It's a machine. It's legitimately a machine. Just to explain, you know, with a Democratic mayor and an entirely Democratic city council, Number one, our Republican citizens and our more progressive Green Party citizens, and there's many citizens that just, in terms of political party, just not represented on our city council, and that means there are perspectives in the city that's held that are not being heard or represented on city council. That stinks. But when you have a Democratic mayor, an all Democratic city council, an all Democratic board of education, and then you leave the city and we have Democratic state reps and we have a Democratic governor, and we see lots of visits from Senator Murphy, Senator Blumenthal, both Democrats. It's a machine. I mean, whatever those people in national office opinion of me is doesn't matter. What their opinion of my Republican opponent is doesn't matter. They know that they would rather have a Democratic mayor in place because that's the same party. And so to change hands, the leadership for New London, to make the mayor a Green Party mayor would disrupt things for sure, but I'm okay with that because we're looking for answers. We're looking for change, and that's a good way to do it.
So we have 4 minutes left. If we could show what the ballot looks like, just so people know what names are on there. And I have to, there was a forum on Saturday for the mayoral piece of it. Leon and beloved Carter, who is the Republican candidate, were in attendance. On the city council side, Shanice Austin, who will be a guest next week, along with Aaron Ide, a Republican who is running a serious race, and Jeff Hart, who is the one person running for city council who's not an incumbent. He served on the Board of Ed. Were the only 3 candidates that showed up. And I did the math, and of about a quarter of the candidates showed up, and none of the incumbents did. Our turnout rate for voters 2 years ago was less than 20%.
That's right.
But if our candidates will only show up at a rate of 25%, why would our voters come out for a rate more than 20 or 25%?
That's exactly my sentiment. Like I said earlier, the candidates, the incumbent candidates want the voters to show up. And I would ask the voters to show up for them just the way those candidates showed up for the voters when they skipped out on that debate. That was their chance to defend their position and share with the voters what their plans were for their lives, and they opted out of it. And I think you should be offended by that.
Yeah. So we have been trying to get together another event. 4 years ago, there were 3 different mayoral forums that were all well attended.
Yeah.
And this
times.
year, really very little. Hearing Youth Voices, kudos to them. They've been putting things together that are very well organized.
Yes, kudos to Hearing Youth Voices. Like many instances, when the adults don't have it right, you can look to the youth for the answer. Yeah, certainly. I'd like to see more forums. It's pretty embarrassing. I don't think that every election year we want to get in the habit of saying, is there a debate? I'll put a challenge out to the newspaper. I think every year what we should be asking at an election is, what day is the day debate on? It rolls right off the tongue. What day is the day debate on? Because it should be a guarantee. It's the regional newspaper. It's located in our downtown. What's the deal?
Yeah. And I have been trying to get all of the town committee chairs, I'm a Green Committee chair, to co-host, co-sponsor, not a debate, but a Meet the Candidates event, like a speed dating kind of thing, where voters get a chance to at least talk to candidates and ask them their positions. And
I'll talk to any
it's
voter
not
in any
going
forum.
well.
Any
So
voter
if you-
in
it
any
will-
place.
So anyway, we've run out of time. Please register to vote, everyone. Please look at all the names on the ballot, and go to the website at nlgreens.org, where we will try to have a list of events, open office days, and you have a website as well, leonfornewlondon.org, right?
That's .org. That's .com.
Oh, .com. Okay.
leonfornewlondon.com. That's right.
Okay, so thank you, Leon, for coming on the show this week. Next week, we will have Shanice Austin and Aaron sharing ideas from a Green point of view and a Republican point of view on what the future of our city should look like. So we'll see you then. And thanks again, Leon.
No problem.
When the rain don't